What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing a crazy flex submitted to the channel by Dan M. Silveira, who's running a triple buffed level 50 water and flying team in the Open Ultra League with Shiny Pelipper, Shiny Mantine, and Shadow Swanna. But that's not it. All three of these Pokemon are Hundos, so yes, 2 Shundos and a Shadow Hundo on the same team. Now, just to note, these battles were sent in during the first Ultra League rotation of the season, so they are on the old code, and the level of the opposition might be a little bit inconsistent, as I assume these battles were still pre-rank 20, but there's still some very high-level gameplay within these battles. Anyways, with that being said, let's just get straight into the question of the day. What has been your favorite buffed spicy Pokemon to use in the Ultra League this season? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Let's go into the first battle, leading Pelipper into Clefable. This is going to be a fairly neutral matchup here in the Ultra League. It depends what charge moves they've got. If they've got Meteor Mash, then of course that is going to be resisted. But we're going to shield here. The opponent farms up to a potential Moonblast and a full send. So of course, we're going to look to shield that. We're now going to farm up to very close to 100 energy before firing off a Weather Ball. Weather Ball is going to be no shielded. It doesn't deal too much damage here. However, they throw very early. This is just going to be a Swift, and Swift not going to deal too much damage there. Now, unfortunately, it looks like Weather Ball won't quite get the knockout from this range, but we fire it off anyways, and unfortunately, yes, they do barely hang on, but we're going to swap out, catch the move onto our Mantine, and of course, take the damage there. But the opponent going to come in with an electric-type Pokemon, the worst possible thing for this team. However, they are on Sucker Punch on this Belly Bolt, which probably is a lot better than basically any other electric type, which is going to be either running Thunder Shock or likely Volt Switch, which would just decimate the team. However, they can, of course, boost up their defense with these Parabolic charges, and it's going to make this Pokemon really annoying to deal with. But Pelipper has so much energy, so we grab a shield there, we can fire off yet another Weather Ball, and actually able to reach a third Weather Ball on the CMP tie. That is best case scenario for us, and the opponent gonna no shield. Surely at this point they're thinking, well, they can't possibly have another water and flying type Pokemon in the back, but yes we do. They swap out immediately into Talonflame, and they throw straight away, but because they had a one-turn swap, that's an alignment throw, which means we get the full Gust in for free. We've now already got back-to-back Aqua Jets. However, if they end up shielding, we can actually go for one more Gust, still fire off the next Aqua Jet. This is super effective damage. These Gusts have honestly chunked them so much, but of course, Aqua Jet gets the knockout. They come back in with the Belly Bolt, they swap back into their Clefable, looking to catch a charge move or something, I don't know. But either way, Aqua Jet gonna be taking out the Belly Bolt, the Belly Bolt there, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, going to be a bit of an awkward matchup on both ends here. The opponent is going to be swapping out into a Corviknight, and we are going to be loaded with energy, so we're going to fire off the Weather Ball. Weather Ball is going to connect. It really doesn't deal too much damage here, and by the way, these battles I have sped up ever so slightly faster than the 2x speed that I usually do, just because they're quite slow battles. Like, I know these are spicy Pokemon, level 50 Pokemon in the Ultra League, but they are really slow battles, so we have sped them up just slightly more than usual. But either way, we are going to look to probably no shield here. The opponent are going to go for an Air Cutter. They do get the boost here. We can reach yet another Weather Ball, and this should get the knockout. So are they going to shield here? The opponent is going to shield, and at this point, we're probably just going to let the Pelipper go down. So we're going to no shield, Air Cutter, going to get the knockout, and they do unfortunately get another boost. We come in with the Swanna, and we tried to go for the Gust farm down, but unfortunately they barely hang on. So because they are at least double boosted, honestly I was not keeping track of all those boosts there, we might as well just use a shield. The opponent now going to come in with a Jellicent, so of course, going to fire off the Fly. Fly does decent damage, and at this point we're probably going to use our final shield, as we do resist everything, or typically that the Tinkaton can throw. Now the opponent actually catches an Aqua Jet, which is quite nice for us because this is now going to hit for neutral damage, but they end up shielding anyways. The opponent going to fire for the charge move here. They go straight for the Gigaton Hammer, which gets us incredibly low, but we can bank an Aqua Jet, save that for later, and then come in with our Mantine. Now, Mantine is definitely by far the bulkiest Pokemon on the team, so we can tank these Gigaton Hammers a lot more comfortably than on the Shadow Swanna. We're going to go for a Water Pulse. Water Pulse is going to hit for neutral damage, however, it really doesn't deal that much damage in this matchup. You can see a second Water Pulse still won't be enough damage to get the knockout. However, the opponent does us a huge favor. They swap back into Jellicent, looking to catch the Water Pulse, but now we can get the knockout here with 2 Twisters. Twister number 2, of course, going to get the KO, and then we just choose to stay in here, allow them to farm us down, because now we've got the harder hitting Shadow Aqua Jet from the Swanna, and Aqua Jet from this range gets the KO up against the Tinkaton, and we're able to take that game. Into next battle, we're going to see a Dust Noir in the lead. So, of course, this is going to be another neutral matchup here. We're going to no-shield the first move, it looks like. And, of course, Shadow Punch, going to deal decent damage there, but not enough to threaten a shield. We're now going to farm up. We farm up to the Hurricane. We bait with the Weather Ball, and we grab the shield. At this point, we're definitely going to look to shield here, as the opponent is going to fire off a second Shadow Punch. And, again, we farm up to the potential Hurricane, but, again, going to go for a Weather Ball. Weather Ball number 2 is going to be no-shielded, and we can reach a third Weather Ball just before they fully farm us down. So Weather Ball number 3 is going to be shielded, and now we swap into our Mantine. Of course, when you're running a AAA team, like switch advantage isn't really all that important here, so it doesn't matter that we swap out just before Pelipper goes down, because being switch locked with Mantine isn't going to make a huge difference compared to being switch locked with our Swanna. So at this point, we are going to see a Greninja coming in, of course, going to be a Night Slash. Night Slash not going to deal too much damage there, and now we can look to fire off a Twister. Twister is going to hit for neutral damage. We're now going to go for one more wing attack and swap and catch the next Night Slash onto our Pelipper, which of course is going to go down here. We, of course, have got all shields down on the opponent's end. We still got a shield and play ourselves. We're going to look to overfarm just a little bit here and then fire off the Twister. Twister from this range is going to be taking out the Greninja. Their final Pokemon going to be a Corviknight, and unfortunately they barely outpace us to the first charge move. However, we don't really need to shield that. Of course, it would have been nice to land a Water Pulse, but Shadow Swanna, even with a boost on the opponent's end, we should be able to tank 2 Air Cutters here if they don't get a second boost, which they don't. And so at this point, we're now just going to look to massively overfarm. Honestly, 2 Aqua Jets probably will get the knockout, but we might as well just opt for the extra gust there, allow the opponent to throw on poor timing. Now we're going to go for the Aqua Jet. Aqua Jet, big damage. Yes, definitely a second Aqua Jet will get the knockout here. Aqua Jet number 2 taking out the Corviknight, and we're able to take that game. Into next battle, speaking of Corviknight, going to see it here in the lead, and this is definitely why I have sped up these battles just slightly faster than 2 times speed, because a lot of these battles, they're just going to be so drawn out here. Corviknight and Pelipper both hitting for resisted damage with the fast speed pressure. The opponent going to full send a payback this time around, which does do a lot more damage than the Air Cutter. We can now go for yet another Weather Ball. Weather Ball number 2 is going to connect, and a third Weather Ball will probably put them into eventual farm down range. However, likely not being able to farm down with the Pelipper, we might have to swap out. So at this point, we are going to no-shield. They full sent another payback, but now we can come in with the Shadow Swanna, and again, unfortunately, just barely missing out. This time around, that is definitely 1 HP and a dream there on the opponent's end. Actually, no, never mind. They just went down there. Okay, so that was a bit strange. I guess they got damage registration error there, but either way, we are going to go for a Fly, I guess, because that is going to hit for more damage than the Aqua Jet, and we've only got resisted damage to throw right now, so might as well go for the harder hitting move. Now, the opponent going to come in with a Feraligatr, and actually that's kind of fine for us because we can now just go for these neutral damage moves here with the Twisters, where of course everything would have been resisted by the Empoleon. Now, Mantine is very bulky. We don't even need to shield a Ice Beam there. We can now go for yet another Twister. Twister is going to connect, and the opponent, well, we're going to get to another Twister here. Do they want to shield, or do they save their shields for the Empoleon? They're going to no-shield. Makes a lot of sense there, realizing Empoleon very unlikely to be fully farmed down here, as they do have quite a lot of energy already. So at this point, they're going to go for the Drill Peck. Drill Peck number 1 grabs our first shield. They're already at a second Drill Peck, so unfortunately for us, it looks like this is going to be a real struggle to take out the Empoleon, but we do farm up to back-to-back charge moves, and this should be a CMP tie if the opponent throws straight away. However, the opponent opting for the extra fast move instead. We do still have the opportunity to swap out into our Mantine, force the energy here. This is huge for us, but the opponent, they go for the undercharge, and they get the perfect undercharge there, which allows them to be 1 away from a charge move. Perfect play on the opponent's end. Unfortunately for us, Drill Peck takes out the Shadow Swanna, and we end up losing that game. But into the next battle, we're going to see Pelipper into a Greninja. So this is going to be once again a neutral matchup here. We do have to full send a Hurricane, which is a little bit frustrating for us, whereas the opponent, they can just go straight for these Night Slashes, and of course Night Slash does have the chance to boost up their attack stat. Speaking of which, they end up getting the attack boost there right on cue, but either way, we're going to go for a bait with the Weather Ball. They actually no-shield that. Honestly, going for a bait there after they get the boost probably makes sense, because they're more likely to end up shielding after getting a boost, but now the opponent's going to come in with an Espeon, which is quite a spicy pick here. We go for the Weather Ball. That's huge damage already. We're now going to come in with the Mantine, and I believe this is just going to be a Psychic Fang, so we're going to no-shield this. And now Mantine able to reach a Twister already, and Twister should get the knockout. So the opponent not going to bother shielding there. They're going to come in into their final Pokemon, which is going to be a Togekiss. And you know what? We've got resisted Twisters. We can go for Water Pulse, but we might as well just swap out into our Swanna, where we can deal a lot of fast move pressure. The opponent is on Charm, however, so that is something to note. We farm up to back-to-back Aqua Jets here. First one grabs the final shield. We can throw the next one straight away. The opponent not going to make a catch onto Greninja, which means Aqua Jet gets the knockout. They come back in with the Greninja, and at this point, we can just safely shield this up. Gust will connect, and it will get the knockout. So the opponent goes down there with the Greninja, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we're going to see Como-O in the lead, so a positive matchup for us, but once again, a matchup where we will have to full send a Hurricane, so likely we no-shield this, and then we swap out into our Mantine, but no, the opponent's actually going to swap out themselves, catching the Hurricane onto a Feraligatr, where it does a lot of damage. Now at this point, we can come in with the Swanna. We are going to no-shield here as they go for a Crunch, which we're still able to tank relatively comfortably. I mean, considering we are a Shadow Swanna, but now they're going to come in with a Corviknight. So at this point, we have back-to-back Aqua Jets already, so going to fire off the first one. That one is going to be no-shielded, but they likely shield the second one, as of course, we've got a lot of fast move pressure into their Como-O. So the opponent is going to use the shield there. We're likely going to no-shield this, as the opponent is going to go for the Air Cutter, and Air Cutter gets the knockout. We're now going to come in with the Mantine, and we can just safely sponge the damage here. Until they start getting some boost here, then we might end up needing to shield. But the opponent going to swap back into Como-O. That is absolutely fine with us. We can go straight for Twister. Twister going to grab the final shield. And here we don't necessarily need the shield, but I guess we might as well do. The opponent is going to full send another Clanging Scales, which means, of course, they're going to debuff themselves. Twister guaranteed to get the knockout here, as it is super effective. It is non-stab, so it doesn't deal that much damage in the Ultra League, but gets the knockout after debuffing their defense. And at this point, we still don't really need to shield here. The opponent goes for another Air Cutter. They end up getting the boost, but it's going to be too little too late for the opponent here, as we can go for yet another Water Pulse. Water Pulse gets them very low, to the point where we could probably Wing Attack farm it down. However, we now have the energy for the Twister, so we're going to play this super safe. Go straight for the Twister. Twister, from 1 HP, takes out the Corviknight, and we're able to take that game. In the next battle, very positive lead matchup for us. We completely wall the energy from a Golisopod. They're now going to swap out into Annihilate, and this is still a really great matchup for us. So at this point, we farm up to the Hurricane, once again baiting with a Weather Ball, and this time around, we do grab the shield. The opponent going to go straight for a Rage Fist, I assume there. However, I don't know if they got the boost there, so that's kind of strange. Either way, we're going to go for the Hurricane, this time full sending. However, it is going to be shielded. We can still no-shield this. They go for another move there. Maybe they're on Night Slash, actually. It's kind of hard to tell. Either way, we're going to swap out into our Mantine, catching a charge move here, where X-Scissor, of course, is going to be resisted. If they've got X-Scissor and Aqua Jet, I believe Aqua Jet is going to do 5 more damage, so they should be going for the Aqua Jet, but they go for yet another X-Scissor. Unfortunately, of course, our Water Pulse is resisted. We have to go for Twister. Twister won't get the knockout from this range, but it will put them into a very nice farm down range, so that's probably actually slightly better for us. So the opponent goes for yet another X-Scissor. We can commit to the farm down, but the opponent swaps back into Annihilate, so you know what? Might as well full send the Water Pulse. Water Pulse still doesn't get the KO there, and the opponent will reach a last-second charge move. They go for that. They get a boost this time around. I think that was probably Night Slash, though. Either way, their final Pokemon is going to be a Shadow Feraligatr. So at this point, we're just going to safely use a shield. The opponent going to go for a Hydro Cannon bait. It doesn't really matter. We can now full send a Fly. Fly, we actually miss out on the Excellent, which doesn't get the knockout, but it doesn't really matter. We can just Gust, farm down the remainder of their team to take that game. So heading into the next battle, we're going to see a Florges in the lead, so we are going to go straight for a Weather Ball here. Looks like the opponent is going to throw straight away, so there is the potential that they're on Trailblaze and they're looking to boost up their attack stat. However, the opponent is actually going to be on Chilling Water, which, I mean, that's not a surprise, but throwing it into a Water-type Pokemon is kind of a surprise there. We're now going to swap out. I'm not really sure about this play, just because we're now going to be debuffed on our Mantine, and they can actually outpace us to the next charge route as well, so we're going to be double debuffed here by the time we get to throw a Water Pulse, and of course, Water Pulse just not going to do much damage anyways, but especially now not double debuff. So yeah, possibly would have stayed in, at least tanked the next Chilling Water on the Pelipper before swapping out, but either way, the opponent is now going to throw another charge move. They farmed up a lot this time, and they full send the Moonblast, but we're just going to bank the energy, swap back into our Pelipper, and finally we will be able to take out the Florges here, as they don't look to double shield. We still got a lot of energy, and you know what? Because we've got that energy, we might as well just full send a Hurricane right off the bat. Hurricane, gonna be no-shielded. It takes out the Venusaur, and they're gonna have a Skeledirge in the back. This should be game over now. As of course, we can spam out these weather balls. First one, gonna be no-shielded as they realize they're gonna have to tank one of them. Next one should be grabbing the final shield, and Mantine, I believe, is close to, or actually already at the Water Pulse. So we're gonna start. We don't even need the Shadow Swanner for this battle, as Water Pulse gets the KO. We actually 3 ball flexed and 2 shield flexed up against that opponent there. But into the next battle, we're going to see Skeledirge in the lead this time around. So we're going to stay in with the Pelipper, of course. Great matchup for us, and we can fire off the Weather Ball. We're actually going to swap into Mantine as the opponent swaps out straight away as well. But that's fine with us because we've actually got Twister. So this is probably our best matchup into the Giratina. We fire off the Twister straight away. Are they going to be on Ancient Power? We're going to no-shield the first move anyways. And yes, they have Ancient Power. Now, it looks like a second Ancient Power will come very close to getting the knockout, but likewise, Twister also going to threaten the shield here, as it will put them into farm down range. We're now going to look to shield as the opponent is going to go for another Ancient Power. We're going to look to overfarm, but the opponent making a catch onto a Cresselia, where of course Twister, non-stab, really not going to do much damage there at all. We are going to bank a Water Pulse. I don't mind that play whatsoever, and then swap out into our Pelipper, where we're still able to reach a Hurricane before they throw any energy. Hurricane going to deal big damage there. The opponent is on Confusion, so slightly slower to reach the charges than Psycho Cut, but of course Confusions are adding up. But Grass Knot, not enough damage to get the knockout or even put us into farm down range before we reach a last second Weather Ball, and Weather Ball grabs the final shield. At this point, we're going to come back in with the Mantine. We did bank that Water Pulse, so we're going to throw this straight away. Water Pulse gets the knockout, and let's see what they want to do. They're going to come back in with the Skeledirge. We're going to swap out into our Shadow Swanner, and at this point, we are going to look to no-shield the first move. We know they're on Ancient Power. Ancient Power is super effective damage, but I do believe a Shadow Ball from Skeledirge would do more damage. At this point, we don't really overfarm by that much. I'm quite surprised by that play, because I don't know if we reach a charge move here now. The opponent goes for Disarming Voice. They're one away from the next charge move, and they get there in time. Disarming Voice number 2 will guarantee to KO the Swanner, but Mantine just 2 away from the Twister. We're able to reach it at the last second. Twister gets the knockout, and we're still able to take that game. So it looks like we go 5-0 in that set. Very nice. Into the next battle, I see Shadow Charizard in the lead. So great lead matchup for us. The opponent is going to choose to stay in initially, looking to swap out and catch a Weather Ball, which makes a lot of sense, but we're just going to stay in and full send a Hurricane. Hurricane, going to deal big damage. We're now going to look to swap out, bank a Weather Ball. Really nice play there, and then come in with the Mantine. Of course, they go for Ancient Power. They actually get the boost there, which is not ideal for us, because now Twister probably doesn't threaten a shield, and it doesn't really put them into range where we can farm them down either. Well, I mean, I guess we can farm them down, but we are going to have to tank 2 more Ancient Powers here, or at least shield one of them and then tank the next. But they actually swap back into a Cavalion instead, which honestly is kind of good for us, because with resistant fast pressure, they're never going to be able to farm us down. Yes, they can farm up quite a lot of energy here, but we've already got them deep into the yellow health range. So at this point, we are likely going to no-shield this, as they just go straight for a Sacred Sword. We are now going to come in with the Pelipper, and I believe they've got the energy for the Stone Edge, so we shield, and it is a full send. They're going to swap back into Charizard, but that's absolutely okay with us. We can go straight for Weather Ball. Weather Ball is going to grab the first shield from the opponent, and this is going to be a CMP time, but we might live an Air Cutter here, so we know shield, but they're actually on Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw, of course, non-stab, costs 50 energy, but it does deal a lot of damage there. So at this point, we are going to come in with the Shadow Swanner. Excuse me there, and the opponent realizing there's not much they can do anymore. All their Pokemon are just way too low. They're going to be Gust farmed down, and so they just concede the match. But into the next battle, we're going to see Ludicolo in the lead. So another matchup for the Pelipper where it's quite awkward just because Weather Ball is double resisted. You do have to full send the Hurricane, but the opponent going to be swapping out into a Tinkaton. So at this point, we chip with a Weather Ball. We're now going to swap into our Mantine, where we can very comfortably tank 2 Gigaton Hammers, and we don't necessarily need Switch Advantage just because, like I mentioned already, this is a AAA team. So Switch Advantage, kind of irrelevant really, especially actually having our Shadow Swanner up against the Ludicolo might be slightly better for us just because of that fast pressure, but the opponent makes a really nice catch there, catching a double resisted Water Pulse back onto Ludicolo, where of course that does barely any damage whatsoever. Now, they could have any sort of charge boost here. We're going to shield. I don't know if that was an energy ball maybe, but either way, we're going to farm up to 100 energy, it looks like. Full send the Hurricane, and the opponent isn't going to shield. We've also got the Weather Ball already loaded, so we're going to go for it straight away into Tinkaton coming back in, getting the knockout there as well, and their final Pokemon is a Zygarde. So at this point, we're just going to spam out these Weather Balls here. The opponent very unlikely to shield, so if we can chip damage quite a lot here and then just go for a Gust farm down in the end with our Swanna, that would be quite nice for us. So at this point, we're going to swap out, force the opponent to throw some energy. They go for a slight undercharge there, I believe, which does allow them to get off one more Dragon Tail to farm us down. We're going to come back in with the Pelipper. This is just slightly risky here, just because in case the opponent does end up fully farming us down, we don't know what charge boost they've got, but the opponent is going to throw some energy. So at this point, surely we just no-shield this. It is going to be another crunch. We can come in with the Shadow Swanna, and this is surely now game over. I believe this is going to be another crunch. We are going to no-shield, and crunch does decent damage, honestly, up against the Swanna, but we can go and farm up to back-to-back charge boosts here, and unfortunately for the opponent, there's just not much they can do here. Of course, they can shield the first, but we do have that second one already loaded. It is a CMP tie. However, we've got the second Aqua Jet already loaded. We're going to throw it straight away into the Zygarde. Aqua Jet number 2 gets the knockout, and we're able to take that game. Now heading into possibly the final battle of this video, leading Pelipper into a Feraligatr. So again, going to be a bit of an awkward matchup where we will have to full send the Hurricane, but the opponent also can't really be baiting with a Hydro Cannon as that is resisted damage. The opponent swaps out there, maybe looking to catch a Hurricane onto a Alolan Sandslash. However, we're just going to stay in, chip with a Weather Ball, and then swap into our Mantine. Now, Mantine not going to have the best matchup here just because, of course, the wing attacks are resisted, and unfortunately for us, Water Pulse is not going to get the knockout from this range, and it's not really going to put them into farm down range either. However, this is kind of just our damage sponge where when we don't have the best matchup, we just come in with the Mantine and force a lot of energy. At this point, we might even just barely live an Ice Punch here, so we're going to no-shield, but no, unfortunately, that does get the knockout. But we do have a lot of energy here, so we're going to come back in, fire off the Weather Ball after over-farming just a little bit, and Weather Ball is going to get the knockout. They come back in with the Feraligatr, and we can actually reach a Hurricane here before the opponent gets to the next charge move. Hurricane, gonna be no-shielded. We stay in, we force the opponent to make the move there. Their final Pokemon, gonna be a Typhlosion, and of course, this could get a little bit dicey here because they will have access to Thunder Punch, and they are very spammy as well. However, we are gonna go ahead and fire off the Aqua Jet. Now, honestly, we might just commit to a full fast move farm down here. That's personally what I would go for instead, and as you're gonna see, the opponent in throwing the charge move here, not on the best timing, which is very hard to do actually when you are running a 5-turn fast move up against a 4-turn fast move. It does give us an extra Gust in for free. We are going to get the full farm down, and we take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.